Welcome to another UCL Fantasy video ahead of Matchday 5. I'm going to be showing you the best Limitless team you can make. I'm going to be going through each player one by one and explaining each of them, as well as a few alternatives towards the end. So let's get straight into the video. So let's start with the goalkeepers. Now, it's very important to have two different keepers playing on different days. You don't want two of them playing on the exact same day. So one needs to play on the 23rd of November and the other one on the 24th. Now, if we actually look across the list, there is a few decent options on the 23rd, like Manuel Neuer. There's also the Zenit goalkeeper. He kept a clean sheet in Matchday 2 against Malmo, who he is now facing in Matchday 5, of course, in a 4-0 victory for the Russian side. So you could go for him as well. He's only 4.9 million, but once again, with the Limitless, that isn't an issue regardless. But I would still go for Edouard Mendy from those playing on the 23rd. Let me know what you would do down in the comment section below, and if you enjoy this video or find it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. But let's go with Edouard Mendy for the 23rd. Then there's a few decent options, of course, on the 24th, including Handanovic, but I actually would go with Thibaut Courtois because he can also get additional points for saves, and Real Madrid, I think, have a better defense than Inter Milan, so I would go with Thibaut Courtois. And I did actually go with Courtois and Eder Militao Matchday 2 against Sheriff, and that did backfire ultimately, but I think Real Madrid are getting better and better as the season progresses, and Sheriff have kind of hit a wall at the moment, and they haven't been as impressive as they were in the opening match days of this season. So I'd go for Thibaut Courtois and Mendy. It's the same duo I went for in Matchday 2, and of course remember the fixtures correspond in Matchday 5 to Matchday 2, just the other way around, of course. So that's the kind of goalkeeper sorted. Let's head straight into defenders. And ultimately, look, I know Joao Cancelo, he is the highest scoring defender in UCL Fantasy. I know he's facing PSG. Of course, Messi scored his first goal in Ligue 1 the other day, but I would still go for Joao Cancelo in there. I just think the form he's in at the moment is absolutely crazy. He's getting assists in the Premier League as well, and he's just looking like such a great asset. He also can get a lot of ball recovery points, and yes, I'm not expecting a clean sheet, but he can get additional points from different avenues, and I think he's just too good of an option at the moment to not include him in this squad, and I think he's far better than pretty much most people, regardless of the fixture, which is very tough this week, of course. So Joao Cancelo is one of the first names on the team sheet, and I definitely go for him. Now, looking across the rest of the list, so Chelsea defenders, you could still go for Azpilicueta. He has been starting a lot in the Champions League. Will that continue? I'm not so sure. I know a lot of people love the fullbacks or wingbacks like Reece James and Chilwell. I think they're not as appealing assets in UCL Fantasy because ball recovery points makes assets like Rudiger, for example, just as good, if not better, because they get more ball recovery points and the others don't really get as many. Of course, they can get those attacking returns, but I think in FPL, that's where you really want to have those assets. And they are facing Juventus after all. I think I'd rather cover that with Edouard Mendy. But of course, you can still go with a double up in Chelsea defence. I probably wouldn't go there myself, but looking across the list, there's a lot of good options. Nicolas Süle is a bit disappointing because it looks like he might not actually play. He didn't play in Matchday 4, which was very disappointing. Of course, he has been very good up until now, but I'd go for Joshua Kimmich. I know he hasn't really been doing too well so far this season in the Champions League, at least in UCL Fantasy terms, but an option playing on the 23rd of November, and I think he could do really well. Of course, he's got a lot of attacking potential, and remember, you have no budget restrictions, so I think he can slot in very nicely. And I'd also go for yet another premium offensive player, of course, and we kind of know who we're talking about as soon as we mention him, is Trent Alexander-Arnold, of course. 2 assists against Arsenal, and he's just such a great player, of course. And against Atletico Madrid, he did the same thing. He is a big weak link defensively, and top teams can exploit that. But from a fantasy perspective, he can get those assists and the occasional goal, but mainly relying on those assists. And of course, he is such a creator for Liverpool, so I would definitely recommend Arnold. And you're covering pretty much 3 of the best defences, 3 of the best teams in Bayern Munich, Liverpool and Man City by getting their defenders. Now, I mentioned the double up with the Real Madrid defenders, having Courtois and Eder Militao. I did that in Matchday 2. Have I learnt my lesson? Probably not. I would still go for him. He gets a lot of ball recovery points, and he's got a bit of threat from set pieces. So I think Eder Militao is a good option, and I probably would go for him. I know, obviously, you have this kind of inclination or temptation to go for the most expensive players and the shiny toys, but Eder Militao can get you a goal, maybe. But mainly with him, it's the ball recovery points. He's got a good fixture. It is away, But then again, I think Real Madrid have a very good defence, especially in recent weeks. So I would go with Eder Militao, and I think that's a good double up there with Courtois and Eder Militao. And of course, a bit of a differential. Not many people this week will have that double up. They might just have one, and if not, they might not have any Real Madrid assets in defence. So I think that could actually be a nice differential for you. Now, the final defender I'm going to go for, it's a bit of maybe a contentious one, and it's not something I would have recommended, but they have had a managerial change recently, and they did win their first game 1-0 in a derby against Espanyol. And of course, we're talking about Jordi Alba. He's got a lot of attacking threat. He showed at the Euros, and even for Barcelona, during some of his kind of tough stints at the club, he still gets a lot of assists, and I think he could be a very nice differential for you this week. If you're looking for one and you're on the Limitless, I would definitely recommend Jordi Alba, and I think that would complete the defence. Of course, there are different choices you can go for, honourable mentions, the Chelsea ones, for example, and many, many more, but I would probably go with these lot instead. Mazzari is another decent one against Besiktas, but I probably would go with these 5 on a Limitless, and I think you kind of cover different bases. You're getting pretty much 4 really offensive-minded players. Obviously, Kimmich is out of position, Cancelo and Trent always bomb forward, and Eder Militao gets a lot of ball recovery points, so I think that's a nice balance to have. Of course, once again, let me know if you would change anything, but I think it's a pretty decent looking defence, and a few changes, I'd say, from my Matchday 2 Limitless team, which of course had the exact same fixtures to work with. Now looking at the midfield, and some of the same names as I've always been talking about throughout the season are going to appear here once again, and it might be a similar looking midfield to my Matchday 2 Limitless team. But of course, I know there might be a few doubts about whether they're going to start because they've already qualified, but Liverpool assets still offer such great value, and in Matchday 2 I talked about the double up of Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah against Porto. Liverpool historically do very well against the Portuguese side, and the same goes for Salah and Mane, and of course Mane was a bit of a differential there. He did well, he got 8 points, and Salah had a crazy score away from home, and he could do the same thing if he does start in Anfield. Of course, that's something for you to decide. I think he will start based on the information we have up to this point at the time of recording, and I would go for Salah once again, and I actually would go for Sadio Mane and have that double up and resuscitate that from Matchday 2, and I think it could be a nice differential once again on a Limitless and a wild card. Sometimes you want to pick out these differentials, whether it's a certain player themselves like Mane, or just having Salah and Mane as that differential double up. I think that could be very crucial, and I would definitely recommend it, and I don't think they'll let you down. The next midfielder we're going to go for is Leroy Sané. I've been talking about him all season. He's been one of the best wingers in the world, of course, and he's had such a stellar season. I would go for him, a decent fixture against Dynamo Kiev, and I think if you haven't had him already, now is still the chance to get in on him. Of course, Bayern have already qualified, so there may be some rotation. Don't be too surprised there. And Gnabry's another one you can go for, but of course, there's going to be a possibility of either one of them, and same with other assets like Coman, facing rotation. So take that with a pinch of salt, but I think if Sané starts, I think he's a great option for the upcoming 2 match days, and of course going into the knockouts he's still looking like a really good option going into them, of course. But Sané, I definitely recommend him, and I think he can offer you such great value, and he can even match Lewandowski for the captaincy, which he has been doing recently prior to Matchday 4, so definitely one to go for. Now, a little revision to my team based on news that's been coming out over the last week or so with players like Joshua Kimmich, for example. He's been quarantining and he hasn't had the vaccine yet, and there's this whole debacle that we won't get into, to be honest, because we're focused on UCL Fantasy. So if you aren't too sure of him starting, and to be honest it's looking likely that he might not play, then I would look at the fixtures and go for other assets. So if we actually take a look, on the 23rd, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of most of the defenders in that day. Of course, you can still go for a Chelsea one. I tend to go with their assets in all of these videos. The fixture is relatively difficult on paper, but you can go for Rudiger, Reece James, Alonso or Chilwell, depending on who you think is going to start. And of course, Christensen's been fantastic. Azpilicueta, it depends on who's going to start there for Chelsea, but of course, they need to qualify still. Juventus are top of their group, so you can go for one of their assets. Then looking at young boys Atalanta, you could go for Mela or another Atalanta defender. And other than that, really, I'm not really too confident in most of these assets. That's why I'd probably be looking at some of the options on the Wednesday. And then Inter versus Shakhtar, I think Skriniar could be a good choice to replace Kimmich. And then Ajax, Besiktas, Mazzari, as I mentioned before. Thomas Meunier is still a decent option against Sporting. And other than that, Man City, PSG, already covered with Cancelo. I wouldn't go for another defender. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Maybe another Real Madrid defender, but tripling up is not something I would do, to be honest. And then maybe Angelino against Club Brugge, but that's kind of all of the alternatives. If I had to pick one, I probably would go for Skriniar, and if not Mazzari, to replace Joshua Kimmich in this side. Let me know what you would change down in the comment section below, but that is what I would go for to replace Joshua Kimmich, because remember, there is quite a big chance that he's not going to make it to the next game, which is unfortunate because I think he could do really well. You could also go for a like-for-like replacement from Bayern Munich themselves. Sula would definitely be someone I'd recommend, but because Sula hasn't been starting recently, especially in the Champions League, it is a bit of a doubt to actually go with him. So I honestly would just go for Mazzari or Skriniar, and right now I just pick Skriniar, and of course you can always go for someone else if you're not really feeling those assets. Now, continuing the midfield, we have different options of course we can go for, and a lot of kind of weird names, seeing Jorginho, Varnakin and others near the top in terms of the goal scoring charts, the top points charts. But of course, Jorginho historically is a good UCL fantasy player. Mars is up there as well, Bellingham. But I honestly would actually go for someone who hasn't got too many points this season so far, but I'm looking at the fixture against Young Boys and I think I'd want to take advantage. Now, you could go for Ilicic, who has been a good UCL fantasy asset over the past few years, but I actually go for the informed Pasalic. I think he could actually be a really nice differential and he could do very well. Obviously, he hasn't been doing so well at the moment in the Champions League, but that could change with that fixture against Young Boys, and that would complete the 4 midfielders here that you can see in your starting 11, but we still have one more spot. The final spot, of course, I've been talking about some of these assets. You can go for Bruno Fernandes, of course, facing Villarreal. You've got Bellingham, but I would go for Nkunku. He's been having such a great season, and he is facing Club Brugge, who, on paper anyway, are the worst side in the group, so I would go for Nkunku there, and that completes the midfield. But if you're not sure about Pasalic or Nkunku or anyone else, you can go for Bruno Fernandes and others. Even Danjuma against United isn't a bad shout, but I'd be going for one of those assets instead. But yeah, obviously it depends on how you're feeling. Personally, I think Pasalic is a very nice differential, but if it was my team, I probably would go for someone more tried and tested. That's just the way I play sometimes, and I'd go for Bruno Fernandes. But of course, you can go for Pasalic or Ilicic, and they could do very well because of that very nice fixture. Now, to complete the front line, this may seem a bit boring, unfortunately. Of course, you can look at all the forwards and marvel at how many options we have this season. Cristiano Ronaldo, Adeyemi, Antony, Haller, Lewandowski, Vinicius Jr., Paulo Dybala, etc. The list goes on and on and on, but I think it's just best to simplify things and not overcomplicate it. Lewandowski for me is a must, and Choupo-Moting has actually been back recently, so there's a possibility that it's him, the Cameroonian striker, starting up front instead of Robert Lewandowski, because obviously Bayern Munich have already qualified. But otherwise, if Bayern still go with a strong team and want to kill the remaining opposition, Lewandowski playing up front, he gets so many chances supplied to him. Bayern are a super team really, and I think Lewandowski is a fantastic option, so I'd go for him. And I would also go for, take your pick from the Real Madrid attack. You could go for Vinicius Jr. or Benzema, maybe even both. That's once again a very nice differential to have. If I had to pick one, I'd still go for Karim Benzema, who did very well in Matchday 4. And of course, you can go for the Brazilian as well. He just scored his 10th goal in the league, I believe, in La Liga, of course, but I would go for Benzema over him instead. And finally, yet another, you could say, boring pick. Let's actually see his ownership right now. 20%, so not a differential really. Not that highly owned, but once again, not a differential by any stretch of the imagination. The Champions League top scorer this season, who would have thought? The former West Ham striker, Sebastian Haller, facing Besiktas. And of course, you could go for maybe Ansu Fati and Memphis Depay, and many, many others like Vinicius Jr., Cristiano Ronaldo, but I would probably go for Sebastian Haller, and that completes the Limitless team, the best Limitless team you can make. Once again, if there are any players that you're not too sure of, or if you think there are ways to improve this team, then let me know down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you very much to everyone who's been supporting the videos and the live streams over the past few weeks and months. Very much appreciated, and I'll try to do a best wildcard team and also show you my team selection over the coming days, as well as the deadline stream on the Tuesday, an hour or so before the deadline. So thank you very much to everyone who's been supporting the channel. Good luck with UCL Fantasy Matchday 5. Same goes for FPL, and also enjoy your week in general, and I'll see you next time.